Okay.
Hey guys. Yeah, so good to be back. I hope you enjoyed our last lesson where we talked all about coming up with an idea for your short film and writing your scripts. I know that a lot of you sent over the scripts that you're currently working on, or at least the little ideas that you had for your films. I haven't had a chance to read all of them yet, but I think they're looking really, really good. I saw some really nice ones. I saw a scary one about a creepy doll. I saw one about a mysterious cell phone call that was really great, and another one, a drama between a friendship that needs to be repaired. So I think you guys are off to a really good start and definitely paid good attention during our last lesson. So amazing ideas. If you haven't thought of an idea for your film yet, don't worry. Keep thinking about it. Keep following some of the tips that I gave you in the last lesson, just about, being inspired by the location around you and things in your home. And I'm sure you'll come up with something. Or I know somebody suggested during the question, the Q&A session during the last lesson about the idea of recreating a scene from one of your favorite films. If you can't think of an idea for your own film, that's definitely a good place to start. At least you'll get to practice with all the camera shots and all the things we're going to be talking about in the next few lessons. So don't worry too much if you haven't thought of an idea yet. Or if you, as you do keep thinking of them and as you do keep writing your scripts, definitely keep sending them over to us because I really want to read them, and hopefully in the next lesson we'll even go through a few more of the examples so you guys can get a sense of what everybody else on the course is working on. I think that'd be really fun just to share a little bit. So today's lesson, we're getting into some of the good stuff. We're going to be talking about composing shots and creating something called a storyboard. I don't know if you've heard of this term before, but basically what that means is every film that you've ever watched started off on paper. So it means you're creating kind of a blueprint for your film and kind of drawing down all of the shots that you're going to be going through so that you have something to work off of and you're not just picking up your camera and shooting without any kind of plan. So planning is very, very important in filmmaking. But before you can make that plan, we thought it would be a good idea to kind of talk about all of the different shot sizes that and ways to kind of compose the image in front of your camera and how to make your shots look really, really good. So that's what today's lesson is all about. So I'm going to jump right in, and then again at the end we'll have a Q&A. So have your pen and paper ready and be sending in your questions so that I can answer them at the end. And just a couple of reminders as well. I know Jake already mentioned, but make sure you're signed into Menti because that's where you're going to be sending your questions through. Also, just a quick reminder right now to maybe adjust the volume. I would bring it down a bit because it might come up a bit differently on everyone's different devices, and I don't want to deafen you. So bring your volume down, and then once I start playing the video for the lesson, you can bring it back up. Also, if you weren't here for the last lesson, just to let you know, we did create our own short film here at Chocolate Films, just using our iPhones and some lights around the office. So we wanted to give you guys an example of the fact that you can create a film at home using nothing but your phone, the camera in your phone, and just things around your house. We're a professional production company. We do a lot of documentaries and short films and exhibition films for all the museums, so we know what we're talking about. But we didn't want to, give you an example using all of this expensive equipment that we've got because you might not have access to the same kind of things. And I know I said it in the last lesson, but I'm just going to keep repeating myself with the fact that you don't need fancy equipment to make an amazing film. Honestly, you could have the best camera in the world, and if you don't know how to use it, your film's not going to be any good. So that's what these sessions are all about, learning how to work with your camera. We're going to talk about sound, we're going to talk about lighting, all kinds of stuff, and just using your phone and bringing some friends on board to be an actor for you and using some props from around your house, you're going to make an amazing film. So I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can play the next lesson, and I'll see you on the other side.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the last lesson about conceptualizing your film and writing your script. In this lesson, we're going to start learning how to take your story off the page and bring it to life on screen. One of the most important considerations to make when visualizing how you're going to capture your film is composing the shots. Films are made up of dozens of different shots. The shots play out in a series of sequences that help you to tell your story in a way that's engaging and interesting. Take our film Unboxing, for example. If we had created the film using only one shot, it would have been pretty boring. Instead, we used a variety of shots, edited together to help enhance the drama and the horror of our story. With horror films in particular, you'll notice that there quite often is actually a lot of shots, and the way that they're edited together is actually what makes the film really scary. There are unlimited possibilities when it comes to composing your shots, so we're going to teach you about the most classic shots used in filmmaking so that you can make sure that your film is as cinematic and exciting as possible. There are 4 elements of shot composition that you need to know. The first is shot size. Shot size refers to how much you're seeing in the frame. The most common types of shot size are wide shots, medium shots, and close-ups. You can also break these down even further, for example, extreme close-ups. But essentially, those are the most common shot sizes that you will use. It's very important that you capture a variety of shots when you're shooting your film. This is because if all of the shots are too similar, they'll look odd when you cut them together in the edit. It can create what is known as a jump cut. And you can see, it just looks strange when you watch it. Jump cuts are distracting and can pull your audience away from your story. So try to make sure you capture a variety of shot sizes that will cut together more seamlessly in your edit. Next, you'll want to consider your framing. Again, there are a variety of framing options to choose from, but the most common ones you can draw upon are single shots, where there's one person in the frame, 2 shots, where there are 2 people in the frame, 3 shots, 3 people in the frame, and so on and so forth. Another common shot is the over-the-shoulder shot, where we're looking at one character over the shoulder of another character. We use this a lot, especially when there's dialogue between 2 different characters. Finally, there's the POV shot, which stands for point of view, and it means that the frame is from the character's perspective. We use this when we want to show the audience what the character is seeing. POV shots can be a bit distracting, so you need to use them carefully. But you can see a good example of one in our film, Unboxing, when the protagonist looks over his shoulder, and then we cut to a POV of the box in the middle of the room to reveal what he is seeing.
Hello, anybody out there?
A good tip to keep in mind when you're establishing your framing is balance. Having a well-balanced frame is something you'll get better at the more that you shoot or even just take pictures. You'll start to notice that sometimes something looks a bit funny to you and you're not really sure why. And sometimes it's because your frame isn't balanced. Maybe there's one big section of the frame that's a blank wall and all of your action is happening down in the small corner of your frame. This would be really unbalanced and it does make the viewer feel a bit uncomfortable or something just doesn't look very professional or polished. So it's important as you're going through your film not to rush. Don't just hit record and start filming anything that's there. Take some time, move the camera around as much as you need to, and find a frame that looks pleasing to your eye. It probably means that it's balanced. Maybe your first shot you come up with, there's a big empty space on the corner of the wall behind the character. And if you just take one small step to your left, suddenly the frame looks a lot nicer. This is really important. Give yourself that time to play around and find shots that look really nice.
Level 43, going down. I hate this music. But we're only just getting started.
I didn't sign up for this. I know this is a lot to think about all at once, so there's a really great tip that you can use to kind of help you keep all these things like headroom and looking space in mind. And it's called the rule of thirds. And all it means is that you can create some imaginary lines going across your frame that divides your frame into 9 sections. When you do this, there will be 4 intersections on your screen, and these intersections are places on the frame that the audience's eye naturally is drawn to. This is a tip that every professional photographer and filmmaker relies on to help make sure that they're composing really well-balanced, beautiful frames. You can put your subject in any one of these 4 intersections, and it's automatically going to be a much nicer, well-balanced image. You can definitely play around and give this a try, and you'll see what I mean. But here's a few examples for you to look at. The best part about the rule of thirds tip is that you can use it for anything that you're filming. So your subject doesn't even just have to be a person. You could be filming an object or a big, beautiful landscape. In any of these situations, the rule of thirds is going to be your best friend. When you're developing your frame, it's also important to keep in mind that you're working with a 3-dimensional world, not just 2 dimensions. This means that you don't just have to look at things from left to right and up and down. You also need to think about the fact that your frame is deep. The best way to understand this concept is to remember that your frame has a foreground and a background. You might have heard these terms before. The foreground is when you've got objects or subjects that are closer to your camera. And the background is everything that's happening deeper within the frame, maybe behind your subject. I can give you a great example from our film Unboxing. There's a certain scene where we've got the box in the foreground, our subject is kind of in the middle, and we've got the doorway behind him leading into this strange, creepy light, and that's the background. So now you can see we've divided our frame into this really deep, interesting world, and we're working three-dimensionally. It's really important if you're shooting with your phone or your iPad that you're not just holding it in your hands when you shoot, unless you're intentionally doing handheld movements. So it's always important that you're using a tripod or something to stabilize the camera. In our film, we had a little iPhone tripod, which you can get really cheap online, but you definitely don't need to buy any extra equipment. You can use anything that you can find right around your house and just get creative and build your own camera rig. So for example, a really simple solution is to just use a table or a chair to get the height that you want for your shot, and then just use some books to prop your phone against, just like that. And it's nice and stationary. You can hit record and leave it there. You can also get creative with some objects around your house to make a tripod. For example, these little clips are really great for a quick and easy tripod. Just open it up, put your phone in it like that, and then the legs spread out. There you go. Perfect little stable tripod. You can also get creative with camera movement, and this is where it gets really fun. In our film, we used a wheelie chair to get some really cool movements, and we just put the tripod and the camera right on the chair and gently moved it across the floor to get a really nice tracking shot. You could also use a wheelie chair to do some really simple pans. But another great idea is if you have your little tripod, like with my little clip here, you can just put it on a piece of cardboard, and as long as you have a smooth surface, like a table or a countertop, you can just very gently drag the phone along the table. There you go, really smooth little tracking shot. Simple, right? As I always say, just keep it really simple and use the things around you. You don't need expensive equipment. You just need a little bit of patience and imagination, and you can come up with some really great ideas for inexpensive DIY equipment that will help you make your film look really good.
When you watched Unboxing, did you notice how we used some really interesting angles and camera movement to help build the tension of the story? Here are a few camera angles you may want to consider when you're shooting your film. Low angle, the camera is low to the ground and looking up at the subject. A high angle, the camera is high and it's looking down at the subject. Bird's eye view, the camera is far above the subject and almost looking down like a bird in the sky. And a worm's eye view, so the camera is on the floor or at the lowest point and looking up at a subject. Another really interesting angle is called the Dutch angle. So this is when the camera is intentionally tilted to one side or the other. The angle is kind of strange or a bit unusual, and it makes the viewer feel very uncomfortable. This is used a lot when we're shooting maybe action scenes or horror films, when we want the audience to feel a little bit disorientated or uneasy, because that's how exactly the character's feeling at that moment. The last thing you want to think about when composing your shot is movement. Movement is really important when it comes to cinematic filmmaking. Movement is what makes films different from photography, and it's a very powerful tool to help enhance your story. Some great examples of camera movement are when the camera is actually stationary, so when the camera is on a tripod. One of those movements is called a pan. This is when the camera is on a tripod and it moves from left to right, following the action or revealing something in the frame. And there's also the tilt. Again, the camera's on a tripod and it moves up or down to follow the action or to reveal what is above or below. And then there's a tracking shot. And this is when the camera actually moves along with the subject. Or the dolly shot, when the camera moves closer or pulls away from the subject. And then there's the handheld, when the camera is a bit shaky because the camera operator is actually holding the camera instead of it being on a tripod. It's really important that when using handheld, you use it for a creative reason. For instance, in our film, there's a moment when the character is breathing very heavily and is feeling very scared. And we thought that the handheld camera work would make the audience feel the nervousness and the tension, almost as if the camera is also breathing very heavily. But if there's not a creative reason for using handheld, then you should really keep the camera on a tripod and keep it stabilized. So there you go. You now have an arsenal of tools at your disposal to help you make shots more dynamic and help tell your story in the most interesting way possible. You can consider shot sizes, framing, angles, and movement. It's a lot to think about, but try not to be too overwhelmed. Remember, Just keep thinking about the story you're trying to tell and use shots that really help create the mood and the feeling of your film.
Sorry guys, I'm just gonna pause for 1 second because I think this is playing a wrong version. So I'm sorry about that. One moment, I'm just gonna get to the most recent one. Give me one moment. Here we go. I'm just gonna get back to where we were. Okay, so we're somewhere around here.
And help tell your story in the most interesting way possible. You can consider shot sizes, framing, angles, and movement. It's a lot to think about, but try not to be too overwhelmed. Remember, just keep thinking about the story you're trying to tell and use shots that really help create the mood and the feeling of your film.
Took the time.
Yeah, sure. No. Wait, I know you.
No!
It's Tuesday, 5th of August 2014. This interview is being tape recorded. I am Chief Inspector Smith, based at Scotland Yard. I work for the Homicide Department. Please state your name. Lolita Huntington. You said earlier it was okay to call you Lola? Yeah, that's my name. For the purpose of this interview, can you confirm your date of birth, please? 10th of February 1981. Can I have some water, please? You've chosen not to have a solicitor present? That's because I didn't do anything wrong. There has been a series of severe crimes in this area. We need you to account for your movement on the 1st of July 2014, when your known associate, Vinnie Brookstein, was beaten to a bloody pulp. I've already been over this. I was on my own, letting off some steam as usual. And on the 10th of July at 6:30, your ex-husband, Steve Johnson, was discovered with multiple stab wounds. Can you explain your whereabouts? I told you I was at home, and I haven't seen that scumbag in years. But you had no witnesses, Miss Huntington, And surely this can't be a coincidence, since your ex-husband's fiance, Emily Stewart, was found fatally poisoned the very next day. Where were you? I hadn't known that. And finally, your old friend Joey Finkel was left for dead at the back of an alleyway, shot in the back. We know you did it. Just confess. Did you honestly think you were going to get away with this?
You've got the wrong person. You have no evidence.
You have no evidence and no proof for your alibis. You have a motive and a connection to every victim. For that reason, I'm placing you under arrest. For the murders of Vinnie Brookstein, Steve Johnson, Emily Stewart, and Joey Finkel. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention, when questioned, something you will later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. And I didn't do anything.
Now that you understand how to compose shots, it's important to get them down on paper. This will help you to save time and a lot of headache when you start shooting your film, because you'll know exactly which shots you're going to capture even before you start shooting. It will also really help you to visualize how your film will be edited together, and you can avoid things like jump cuts, which will be distracting to your audience. When you put all of the shots down on paper, that's called a storyboard. And now I'm going to hand you over to Ross, who will show you exactly how to create one.
We're now going to look at one of my favourite parts of filmmaking, storyboarding. For me, this is the part where you really get to see your ideas come to life for the first time. But why is it so important? Well, like any other kind of design, it's always important to have a blueprint. Whether it's a house or a car or even a computer game, a plan can really help you see whether an idea will actually work or not. An idea can make complete sense in your head, but may not be so straightforward to film. So a storyboard can therefore be the perfect medium to work out all of the problems and solutions. It can also help to identify any plot holes or repetition in the narrative. Perhaps you could cut out lots of dialogue if the message can actually be conveyed through an image alone. Or you may realise you only need a close-up of a character's face and don't need to build that elaborate set you had in mind. It's also really important to make a storyboard if you're working as part of a team, as it means that everyone is on the same page and understands the vision. It's vital for the camera person to know exactly how they should film everything, and a storyboard can also be invaluable to the editor. So I think editing is quite similar to putting a jigsaw together, and obviously a jigsaw is quite hard to do if you don't know what the final picture is. It also gives the actors an idea of how to interact with each other and the environment around them. The best thing about storyboarding is that all you need is a pen and a bit of paper. And it doesn't really matter if you can't draw, stick figures are usually good enough. As long as there's enough information in there, then it should be fine. So you can include words, arrows, directions, anything that you find useful. So now I'm going to take the script for unboxing and use everything we've learned so far about shot sizes, camera angles, and apply that to a visual plan for the film. So we've got our script, and I've also got some storyboard templates here. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through the script and mark out all the different scenes and potential shot sizes we could do. So if we start off, we've obviously got our location in an empty room, a small strange void of a space, no furniture. So instantly we've got a bit of an image. So usually you want to start off with a sort of wide shot to establish the scene. And from there in, go into the character, probably with the mid, and then some sort of close up, just to really show the emotion in the character. And now you can see some action, so he gets to his feet. Something like that makes you think it could be quite good to have some camera movement, so maybe a pan up or a tilt or some sort of movement. So maybe we could put a sort of pan in there. And then we go on to the next scene where he starts to notice the box. There's obviously a movement here where he backs away from it and rushes to the door. Something like that could be really good for a sort of dolly shot. And again, when he starts to read words like he's trying to unlock the door and there's lots of panic, you immediately think that would be good as like close up, maybe extreme close up. Okay, and so when you also see phrases like turns over his shoulder, that can obviously be quite good as an over the shoulder shot, something we learned about earlier. Okay, and then again, it feels like we move into our next scene here where he's trying to unlock the door. So say he jimmies the handle, continues to push hard, the whispers go louder. So for that, I'm imagining almost a little sequence, quite fastly cut, close-ups, back and forth between the box, between the hand on the door, between his eyes possibly. So that could work quite well as a close-up sequence. And again, you see things like his eyes bulging with fear. That would be really great as a close-up of one of his eyes possibly. Yeah, and we cut quickly between the lock, the box, and the man's fearful eyes. So again, that's like a really nice sequence there. And then eventually the door opens, it clicks, the man turns the door handle and the door flies open. So again, you probably want to cut back to more of a mid shot, even a wide shot, just to re-establish the space, possibly seeing the man and the box in relation to each other. Okay, and I think when he turns around and walks back into the room, that's the kind of thing that would be good, definitely as a wide shot. Okay, so the next bit, this is a sort of final sequence, isn't it? I think when he opens the box. So I think what would be really good here is that sort of Quentin Tarantino style reverse point of view. So almost like it's a point of view from the box, looking up at the character. And then the final scene, I guess that's going to be a wide of the box. That was a very rough markup of the script, and we're now going to translate that into a storyboard. So I've used these templates that I found online, but really it's just some squares and you can make it yourself. There are 6 spaces, each one represents a different shot. It's the exact same size as the camera frame, so a widescreen view. And there's a couple of lines underneath. So this is really good to put in some extra information. So it could be the shot size you want to do, it could be the camera movement, or it could even be some dialogue. So I think let's just get started going through the script. So as I remember, the first shot was going to be a wide shot, again to establish the space. And there doesn't need to be too much detail, but just enough to go on for the camera person. So from what I remember of the room, so we had a sort of door in the corner, and there was a sort of soft and eerie light pouring through it. An unconscious man lying on the ground. And again, as you can see, it doesn't matter if you're not the best drawer. And I think the whole time we would still have "Don't open the box" on the wall. I'm just going to put the page numbers at the top. So what I'm going to write in here is wide shot and that's quite a good establishing shot. So you can see the room, you can see it's quite empty, it kind of sets the tone. For the next shot, he wakes suddenly, so you really want to see a close-up of his eyes, essentially. So I think we'll have a side view, fairly close up. And there's a little bit of action in this shot, and that's eyes opening. So I'm just going to put that in just so the camera person knows to stay on the shot until their eyes open. And so the next shot, when he wakes up, I think it could be quite good if he rises into the frame. So we could have a mid shot here and some of the dialogue, which is this sort of hello, where am I type thing. And I think because we want them to rise into the shot, we'll write that in there, but I'll also put an arrow there just for some movement. And so the next thing he notices the words "don't open the box" on the door. So it could be quite good if he walks towards that. We maybe could do quite a flat on mid shot of the wall. So almost like he's centered and you see the writing around him. So that's more of a mid shot of the room. And I think actor could walk into frame. At this point, I think the character of the box is introduced, maybe by some off-screen sound effects, some whispers. So we could have the actor turn to look back at the box, almost like a sort of sideways glance. Again, as you can see, simple drawings, but already you can start to see sequences coming together. And finally, I think we want to introduce the character of the box. So I think because it's progressively going to get faster and faster in the editing, we probably want to start with the next big wide shot of the box and then move into close-ups and more abstract shots. So I'm just going to start putting WS, MS, CU just as acronyms for the different shot sizes. So let's put wide shot, box, and room. And then we cut back to the character as they start to become a bit more scared and a bit confused about what's going on. So I think we'll cut back to the mid shot of the room and we can maybe try a dolly shot here. So a dolly shot is when the camera actually moves along. And obviously this is quite expensive equipment you can use in filmmaking, but there's no reason you can't do it with someone sitting on a chair and wheeling the chair along. So let's go for dolly shot. And this is basically going to track the actor as they move to the door. And just to make that clear, we'll put some arrows at the side just to show the camera movement. Now we've got a little sequence of the actor trying to get out the door. So obviously it's good to have lots of close-ups, abstract shots. So immediately you want to see that the door is locked. So we've got a close-up of that, just to emphasize that. And then possibly back to the mid shot for some more of the dialogue. So now we're starting to move between close-ups and mid-shots between the actor and the box to try and ramp up the tension. So I think now when we cut back to the box, we want more of an abstract close-up than last time. And so it may look a bit boring just having a close-up of a box, but I think once we add sound effects and we see the interesting lighting setup, it's actually going to look quite cool. And so I think I would probably repeat some of these shots now. So rather than draw them all out again, I think I might just write repeat sequence several times. And I also had an idea for quite a cool shot. So rather than seeing the actor opening the door, we can maybe flip it around to see them from the other side of the door. So looking at them through the glass. And what could be quite fun about this is that the audio could change because you're on the other side of the door, so it could be completely silent. So that could really ramp up the tension if suddenly there's this screaming person, but you can't even hear them. And now we really want to ramp up the tension, so I think we could cut back to some more abstract shots of the box, maybe even a Dutch angle or just maybe slightly off center, just to slightly unsettle the viewer. So let's just put some kind of strange box angles in. The key part of the script here is now that the door's definitely locked and we're trying to unlock that. So almost focusing in on the locked door. And then I think we'd also talked about a close-up of the character's eye. So again, in films, something like that's really usually done to emphasize fear and panic. And then I think finally, as the door unlocks, we probably want to cut back to a close-up. Really more than anything, just to emphasize that it has now actually opened up. And now I think that the door's finally opened, the tension's probably reduced quite a lot. So I think it'd be good to cut back to a mid shot just to maybe calm things down, just to show that the actor is now kind of safe, or so we assume. Put a little smile on his face. At this point, I think sound effects become quite important. So we probably start to hear noises coming from the box to try and lure the actor back into the room. So I guess we probably just want to cut back to maybe more the wide shot of the box again. And what's great about these is you'll see there's some repetition in shots, and you can actually just reuse the same shot as long as you change up some other things like the audio or the sound effects. So we then need to obviously cut back to the actor, maybe a close-up to show exactly what they're feeling at this point. Because they're now feeling drawn back into the room. And I think it could be a good time to have a reminder just of the actual title of the film. And the whole point that you're not meant to open the box. So let's cut back to a mid shot of the wall. So it could be done as a wide, or it might also be quite cool to do close-ups of each word, and that could be edited together into a sequence. So now is probably a good time to switch back to a big wide shot, just to show the spatial relationship between the box and the actor. So if we've got the box in the middle of the room, and I'm just going to go back to stick figures for this one. The actor's walking towards the box, and we still sort of see the door in the background, it's open, and the writing on the wall. So I was thinking here it could be quite cool to do something with shadows. And so I was thinking the wide shot, maybe more of a mid shot, wide shot of the wall, and the actor could walk into frame, but only their shadow. So you would sort of see their shadow appear on the wall as they go to open the box. And now we can cut quite easily to a hand moving in to sort of open the box. And now we're on to our final scene. So I thought it could be nice to introduce the reverse point of view. So actually looking from the box out onto the character. And what's nice about this is that we're going to be using some interesting lighting. So the character is going to be really, really well lit. And then again, we want to cut to a close-up of the character's face just to really emphasize the shock that they're feeling at that moment. So the next thing we have is a sudden flash. So the best way to do that is actually just in editing, but we'll add a transition that just turns the screen to white for a split second, and that allows us to move into the next shot. And then that takes us to our final scene, which is, of course, the box in the middle of the room. The idea now being that the man is actually inside the box. So it's like the film has came full circle. So what we can do is actually use the audio from that previous shot and underlay it over this shot of the box. And we can add a sort of muffled, quiet sound effect to it. And it should hopefully make it look and feel like the actor is now trapped inside the box. So that is a very basic storyboard. Now, as you can see, I don't have the greatest drawing skills, but it doesn't really matter. I think from this, you have a really clear idea of how the film is going to look. So the storyboard is now done, and hopefully you can see that the film has now come to life a bit more. You can really visualize it. And that will now get passed on to the filmmaker who will be able to shoot it. Hello. Hello, anybody out there? This isn't funny. Hello? Anybody out there? Hello? Anybody out there? Hello? Where am I?
Cool. So there you have it, guys. That is your second lesson done. Sorry about my little glitch in the middle there. I've also just noticed that my background is backwards. Sorry, total Friday vibes, I guess. But yeah, so just as a quick review, because I know, again, it's a lot of information coming at you all at once. And these will be going up online, so you can kind of watch back through if you need to. But so this was basically just to get you really thinking about composing your shots, how important it is to come up with different shot sizes. So even just wide shot, mid shots, and close-ups. And you really need a good mix of those when you're filming, because you can't cut 2 wide shots together or 2 mid shots together, because you'll get what's called a jump cut. And I think you've probably seen this kind of thing on, some of your favorite YouTube channels or whatever, when it jumps kind of jarringly, and it's because the shot sizes are too similar. So make sure when you're planning your shots that you have a good mixture of mid shots, close-ups, and wide shots, so that you'll be able to cut them together really nicely. Something that we didn't actually talk about in the lesson that I did want to mention, that's another way to make sure that you're covered when you're coming up with your shots, is what's called insert shots. So those are any shots where you're not on the actor's face. So in our film that you just watched, you'll notice we got some shots of the wall. We obviously had the shots of the box that was kind of planned. So whatever your film is, if you can get some shots of some of the props or just anything that doesn't have the actor's face in it, that can be really, really useful to help you avoid jump cuts, because you can always kind of cut away to those other things and then go back to your actor. So make sure you write that down, get insert shots. And then, we talked a lot about framing. So just making sure that your frame looks really nice and balanced, make sure there's not too much space above the actor's head, or, that they're not really close to the edge of the frame. It just, looks more professional or look nicer. Use that rule of thirds, that idea of splitting your, imagining there's a grid going across your screen and kind of trying to make sure that your subject is in one of those intersections, to make sure that your frame looks balanced. We also talked about getting a good mix of different angles, so high angles or bird's eye view, if you can kind of film someone from above. Point of view, I think that the short film that we showed that was done on one of our workshops used point of view really, really clever, when she's going to the fax machine and you just see her hand. So that's a really fun one to play with. And then we talked about movement as well. So tracking shots, if you're kind of moving the camera along with the subject, or if you're pushing the camera in or pulling it away from them. And use some of those tips I mentioned in the lesson. You don't need the fancy equipment to do these things. You just have to think cleverly about it. So I think I mentioned in the lesson, but we've got one tracking shot in our short film that you just watched. And we did that actually just by putting the phone, which we did have on a tripod, and we put that on a wheelie chair, like a desk chair, and we just wheeled it across the room like while the actor was walking, and it worked perfectly. So if you've got a wheelie chair, that's a good one. But I also showed you an example of just using like a piece of cardboard on a table. That can work really well too. So just think about all the different movement that you can do. And then I think Ross did a great job kind of walking you through how to do a storyboard. And I know it seems like a lot to do, but I promise it's going to make your film so much better if you take the time to just really think and imagine how it's going to play out on screen. And then just when it comes to storyboarding, the only other things I wanted to mention, I know I love Ross's drawings, actually. I thought they were great. But as he mentioned, you don't have to be a fabulous drawer. You can use stick figures. If you still don't like that idea, maybe you've got a friend or a family member that's a good drawer, and you can ask them to do it for you. Another thing that I do a lot for my storyboards, because I'm a terrible drawer, is I use my phone and I actually just kind of set up the shots. I get a friend and I just, I don't need any lights or props or costumes or anything. I just get the shot on my phone, and then I use those pictures to create my storyboard so that I have something to work from. And that works really well. So you can do that too. You can also look on Google Images and try to find pictures that, shot sizes and frames and angles that work, and just use those as a reference. That could be a little harder because you're going to have to dig quite a bit to find exactly what you're looking for. But anything you can give yourself so that when you're shooting, you can be like, oh, that's my next shot. I'll tick that off. That's my next shot. And you know you've captured everything you need to tell your story. So I think that is, if you're having trouble, that was the only thing I was going to say. If you're having trouble thinking of shots like in your head, you can also, as long as you've done your script and you know kind of what the action is, you can, before you go to actually do the filming, you can kind of have your actor or have a friend kind of just walk through what's going to happen in your film, and just get your camera up and play around and just walk around the actor, just get a wide shot from the back of the room, and you'll actually find a lot of shots just by doing that before you actually go to film. So that's another tip. Sometimes I need to see stuff in front of the camera. I can't imagine it in my head. So that's a really good way to approach that. I'm ready for all of your fabulous questions. Jake, if you're there and you want to come back.
Yes, thank you, Jackie. So we've had a few questions through, and if you want to ask any questions, go over to the Menti link now and type in your questions. But yeah, we've had a few. You actually touched on one. Someone asked whether they can take pictures instead of drawing the storyboard. So you've already said yes, that they can do that, which is great. Someone asked how many frames or how many pictures for their 2 or 3 minute film. So how many sort of pictures might it be?
That is a really good question, because I know I mentioned for a 2-3 minute film that the rule of thumb normally for scripts is like 1 page is 1 minute. Storyboards and shots, it's gonna be completely different for every film, honestly, because it comes down to kind of how many shots you really need to tell your story. I know, for example, in a lot of horror films, you're probably going to have a lot more shots because you need to kind of be jumping around like you saw with our film to kind of build that tension. Whereas if you're doing like maybe a romantic film, it's probably like your shots are going to play out a bit longer. You don't need to keep jumping around so much because the feeling of the film is more relaxed, if that makes sense. So I'm sorry, I don't really have a specific answer. I would say plan as many as you think you need, plan as many as you come up with in your head. And if you don't have time to get through all of them when you're filming, that's okay. Like just as long as you have something to work off of. And then if you notice you're running out of time, you can kind of get rid of a couple of shots if you need to in the moment. But more is always better. So you have more to play with in the edit. You might not end up using all of your shots. That happens a lot. Sometimes, in filmmaking, entire scenes get cut out. They film everything and then they've got it all in the edit and then they get rid of stuff later. So as many as you want, I guess, is the answer.
That's fine. That's what someone asked about the actors. So there's a couple of questions. One is, can we use family members and friends? And I think you said yes, absolutely. That's encouraged. But one person did just answer a question that what if they don't have anyone to be an actor in their film?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've got 2 ideas that you can maybe play with. The first one is you can film yourself. It is a lot harder. I've done it before. Actually, these lessons that we're playing for you guys, we've had to be filming ourselves just because of our social distancing. So it's definitely a lot more work because you kind of have to hit record, get in front of the camera, do your bit, and then go back and stop recording and play it back so you can make sure that the framing was right and stuff. So a little bit more work, but you can film with yourself. Another really great idea, and you can maybe take to YouTube to find examples of this, but your character does not have to be a person. And that sounds really funny, but I'll give you an example. I don't know if I can find the film right now, but I saw a short film once, and it started off with So maybe there was one person just in the first shot with a person crumpling up a piece of paper and throwing it on the floor. And then the rest of the film was about this piece of paper. And he was somebody's idea that they had thrown away. And he was really sad that he'd been thrown away because he was such a great idea. And so they did all of these lovely shots that you were actually feeling really sorry for this little piece of paper on the ground. And they just used a voiceover and some music afterwards to kind of tell the whole story and to give a voice to the piece of paper. So that can be really, really fun. You can personify objects and give them a character and just use things like voiceover and music to bring them to life.
Brilliant. So just use your imagination to come up with something. It's great that you're encouraging everyone to use their imagination as much as possible. One thing that's come up twice, actually, Jackie, that's just twice in the last minute from two different people, is that is it okay to animate the film, or can you have animation in the film as well as real life people? And this came up last week too. I think someone asked whether it was okay to use Lego as a stop motion for the films. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I saw that question last time. I know we didn't get to it. 100%. We unfortunately are not going to be going into like techniques for stop animation in these lessons, but I will say everything we're talking about you can apply to stop animation. So if you already know how to do that, and for those of you watching that maybe don't, stop motion is things like Wallace and Gromit, or where you're kind of moving a character and take a puppet or something and taking a picture of each move that they do, and then when you edit them together, it looks like they're moving. It's very tedious work. But for those of you that maybe already understand that concept and know how to do it, I would say definitely use it. You can apply everything that I've talked about in this video about shot sizes and angles and things. You can apply that to your animation as well. I would also still do a storyboard if you're doing animation, just so again, when you go to shoot, you have kind of a blueprint of what you're going to be doing. And you can definitely incorporate stop animation into live action. Actually, one of the films that we showed, the example, the girl, in her office who was being stalked by, some supernatural being. There's a part where her mouse comes chasing her over the table and wraps around her, and that was actually done using stop animation techniques. So definitely feel free to combine them. Definitely feel free to do a stop animation film, whether it's with Lego or drawings or puppets or, dolls, whatever you've got, that's totally fine as well. And actually that's a good idea for our previous question as well. If you don't have anybody available to be an actor in your film, you can consider, doing a stop animation film.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jackie. And just before you head off, there's a couple about scary or horror films, actually, and someone asked what is the best camera angles to use in scary or horror films, and have you ever made one before? And I count the one that you made before about the box as that genre, but yeah, are there any camera angles that work best for horror or scary films?
Yes. So yes, I have made horror films. I helped make unboxing as well. I wouldn't say there's angles that are best, but scary films and horror films is definitely when you'll see a lot of Dutch angles, which we talked about is when the camera's kind of tilted. And it's because when something's on a Dutch angle, it kind of makes the viewer feel uncomfortable or uneasy, which is obviously something you want your audiences to feel when you're making a horror or a thriller film. So a Dutch angle is a really good one to play with. I think another thing that can make people look kind of scary or can kind of add that tension is less about angles and more about movement. So I know we talked about handheld camera movement, and if you're going to be using handheld, that you need to have creative reasons for it. And they use handheld a lot with horror films because when the camera's moving very slightly like that, it does something to your audience when they're watching it. It kind of adds this breath and this kind of tension. So you can really use that creatively. We used it a few times in unboxing just to kind of create this uneasiness. And saying that as well, you can actually stationary shots when the camera's really still can also be quite scary. So there's not really a like one shot that's best for horror, but basically I guess the best advice I can give you when you're planning your shots is that there's no right or wrong. You give meaning to the shots that you create. So that's what's really important, is as long as you know the reason for it in your head, it will come across to your audience. So if you say that, you know, I'm using this still shot because I think it's really tense, and you stick to that while you're filming your entire film, that's what we do as filmmakers. Like, somebody might use Dutch angles for a completely different reason. I use Dutch angle to make, you know, somebody feel uneasy, but the shot has meaning because I've given it meaning, if that makes sense. I know it's a bit obscure, but as long as you're being really thoughtful, I think it will come across to your audience.
That's brilliant, thank you. And someone has asked, a couple of people actually have asked this, is how do you make the room very, very black? Now, I think this might be something that might come up in one of the lighting sessions, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, that might be something for another session. So whoever's asked that, maybe hang on until next week, because the lighting session is going to be there, and they're going to tell you all about the, those techniques about lighting. And one of the last ones is it okay to use popular songs in your film? And then I think that'll be it. So is it okay to use popular songs in the film?
That's a really, really good question. The answer is normally you need permission to use anybody's song that's copyrighted. You can do a Google search for free uncopyrighted music, which a lot of artists put stuff out there for free for you to use. So that's where, you know, that's what I tend to do. But that being said, I think that only counts when you're planning to sell your film or you're going to make money off of it. So I don't think there would be a problem with it for your guys' films, especially if you're just kind of making a film for yourself to share with your friends and your family and stuff. Bear in mind, if you're planning to put it up on YouTube or something and you're using popular music, I think YouTube does have rules against that. So that's kind of my answer. If you're keeping it to yourself, then there's no problem with it. But if you're going to be putting it out on the internet, or if you're going to want to enter it into some festivals or something, then I would stay away from copyrighted music.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jackie. That was a great session, and lots of really, really good questions, and you answered them perfectly. Thank you so much. And just for everyone else, just to remind you, before you